Thank you very much for your attention. We have an awesome speaker lineup for the next hour and a half. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome to the stage the Capacity Europe 2019 keynote, Philip Graham, Chief Executive of the National Infrastructure Commission, who's going to be talking about Britain's ultrafast future.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to take part in today's event. Good morning, everyone. I'm Phil Graham. I am the Chief Executive of the National Infrastructure Commission here in the UK. Liz has provided an interesting overview of some of the international developments that are happening. I would like to provide a bit of a perspective on the UK's digital challenges over the coming years and decade. But it is nonetheless a real pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity to share some of the work that the National Infrastructure Commission has done with a genuinely global audience. I suspect many of you who are based in the UK or close to home may already be familiar with the Commission. I hope some of you from further afield are as well, but I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background about who we are, why we exist, and our origins. The Commission is a fairly young body. We were established in 2015 by Britain's then Chancellor, George Osborne. And in his words, our role was to think dispassionately and independently about the nation's infrastructure needs. And we have a remit that covers all of the major economic infrastructure sectors. So we look at digital and telecommunications, but we also look at energy, at transport, at water and sewerage, at flood defences, and at how these systems interact and work together. And the idea for a body that does this stemmed from a vision originally put forward by our current chair, Sir John Armitt, to take the politics out of infrastructure planning, to move away from short-termism and the changes of mind and the lack of stability that are all too often symptomatic, and particularly have been symptomatic in the UK, of the political process and the electoral cycle. And you could hardly have a better example of that than the position we have found ourselves in over recent weeks. So a team of commissioners was appointed from amongst, to use a hackneyed phrase, the great and the good of the infrastructure sector, bringing with them unrivaled expertise and decades of real-world experience, including a Commissioner, Andy Green, who ran for some time two of the UK's largest digital businesses. And the job of the Commissioners, and my team, who provide analytical and policy support to them, is to produce a national infrastructure assessment once in every Parliament, alongside a series of more in-depth studies looking at particular infrastructure challenges. And our first of these cross-cutting assessments was published last summer. The report is wide-ranging and forward-looking, making recommendations to take us into the middle of the century and spanning, as I said, transport, energy, water, flood defences, waste management, and, of course, digital connectivity. And we are proud that we think this work is pretty much unprecedented. No other public body in the UK has attempted a review of infrastructure in this way before, looking across sectors and taking such a long-term perspective. And to the best of our knowledge, we think it is a world first as well, certainly in a country and an economy of comparable size to the UK. And as a result, we are seeing burgeoning interest from other countries which have an appetite to learn from our way of doing things, both in the developing and developed economies. Within that assessment on telecoms, we set some ambitious targets and outlined what we think are a clear and appropriate set of policies to meet them. In coming years, digital connectivity will increasingly drive economic growth, competitiveness, and the quality of life of our citizens and our communities. Innovations such as artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things will bring new applications that rely on this infrastructure, from driverless and connected vehicles to virtual reality services, not just in entertainment, but equally to enable healthcare or education to reach communities for whom it's more expensive or more challenging to deliver it to. But of course, you already know this. That's why you're here. You don't need me to make the case for why digital connectivity is so vital, even if there are plenty of audiences to whom it still needs sometimes to be made. And the UK already has one of the world's strongest digital economies, underpinned by an extensive superfast broadband network. Our message, however, has been clear. The future is full fibre. Britain compares well internationally for superfast broadband availability, but we are trailing well behind other countries such as Spain and Sweden, even if we just look at Europe, when it comes to ultrafast. And the superfast network may well meet most current needs, but it is not fit for the future and will not stand the test of time. And given delivery timescales for networks of this kind, that means planning now and urgently for the future. With 5 times fewer faults than copper connections, full fibre is more reliable. It's also cheaper to run. In our assessment, we estimated that fibre would save up to £5 billion in operating costs compared to the copper equivalent over a 30-year period. And the Commission's judgment, therefore, was that a national full fibre rollout programme needed urgently to be put in place. This would provide fast, reliable broadband, improve connectivity in rural areas, and crucially support the rollout of 4G and 5G mobile coverage. However, with just 8% of UK premises having access to full fibre at present, our analysis suggested that it will take at least a decade to build a nationwide network, with some other estimates closer to 20 years. And that's why, in the assessment, the Commission called for full fibre connectivity across all of the UK to all homes and businesses by 2033. We should note that's a target that appears to have been eclipsed by the current government, who want to get there by 2025. But in our view, at this point, the key issue is not the date, but the plan, and making sure that delivery happens, and delivery happens in a way which does not drive up costs unnecessarily or entrench monopolies in these crucial industries and crucial sectors. To roll out full fibre, therefore, it is clear to us that competition is the best way forward. We can already see that the market is starting to deliver. Companies are planning to make full fibre available for up to 14 million premises by 2025, even though competition alone isn't going to be enough to ensure every community across the country enjoys the benefits. Some areas will take much longer to be commercially viable, but these should not be left behind. And our National Infrastructure Assessment makes a series of recommendations which provide a roadmap for ensuring that does not happen, which I will come back to later. Transitioning from copper to full fibre is a substantial infrastructure upgrade and a major programme. To deliver it, the market needs a coherent government strategy. Commercial investors want to see evidence of the government's decision to back full fibre, so they have the confidence to invest. Government therefore needs to deliver a clear strategy and one which will be stable for the long term. And last July, we saw a positive step towards this in the UK in the form of the Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review. Unfortunately, since then, our view is that momentum has stalled. The National Infrastructure Assessment set out a detailed vision for what the strategy should look like. It outlined the importance of providing Ofcom, the UK's telecoms regulator, with the necessary powers to implement and deliver the strategy, and reflected the varying economics of full fibre rollout in different parts of the country. We said the government should promote competition strongly in areas where it's commercially viable for multiple network operators to build and operate full fibre networks. But we also recognise that some geographical areas may not be commercially viable at all, or at least not for many years. And in others, there's only likely to be a commercial case for a single network, for example, in smaller towns and perhaps villages. As I said, ensuring these places are left behind is essential. And in fact, the social research that we carried out as part of the assessment process underlined this, finding that 86% of people agreed that all parts of the UK should have equal access to broadband of the highest quality. Increasingly, that shows that digital connectivity isn't being viewed simply as a nice to have. It is considered a right nowadays, and we should think of it in that way. In the past, the UK recognised that the whole country needed to be connected to electricity, water and transport networks. That's built into our planning system. Now we need the same level of ambition for broadband. To ensure this happens, therefore, the Commission recommended a taxpayer-subsidised infrastructure delivery scheme to these less commercial areas, along the lines of the successful Broadband Delivery UK programme, which directly subsidised up to 50% of the capital expenditure for installing superfast broadband in rural areas. An approach of this kind would not only enable a more rapid spread of these technologies, but would also actually further support competition by opening contracts to a range of bidders, including smaller, more innovative or community-led providers, as well as ensuring cost efficiency through the bidding process. In the short term, it would have positive implications for how quickly and cheaply infrastructure is deployed. In the longer term, it could also enable the costs and performance of subsidised delivery in one region to be measured against others, to provide benchmarks and drive up the quality of the programme. But unlike the Broadband Delivery UK programme, we believe government should start with the areas least likely to receive full fibre broadband commercially, and which are also most likely to experience unreliable broadband currently through long distance of copper cables. And this is what we have termed the outside-in strategy, one that both minimises the risks of unnecessary subsidy and also the risks of remote communities being left behind. There should also be provisions for communities within these areas to be eligible to get their full fibre even sooner if they volunteer to help build their network at community level. And some of you will already be familiar with a company called Broadband for the Rural North, who have already been supporting communities in doing this. Beyond these harder to reach areas, however, competing fibre networks should be encouraged wherever they are feasible. As we have seen from the experiences of other countries, infrastructure competition has been shown to spark investment in both new and existing networks. In South Korea and Japan, it has been a key driver of widespread fibre rollout, with both nations having over 95% full fibre availability. To replicate this success in the UK, we proposed a number of measures. First, there needs to be a clear commitment from government and from Ofcom to promote a competitive market wherever possible, with a stable regulatory regime. A commission to deregulate in geographic areas where commercial competition is effective will be required, alongside ensuring telecoms providers can make what we call a fair bet for the risks they are taking in building new infrastructure. That needs to be built into the regulatory system, as Ofcom has already started to do, in recognition of the long-term benefits it will provide. We want digital infrastructure to have the same processes for obtaining wayleaves and connecting new builds as other utilities, reflecting its increasing utility-like status. And Ofcom must also continue to ensure that all providers can access open-reach ducts and poles on a fair and efficient basis. Those of you who have been following the UK's progress will know that there have been a number of developments since the publication of our report. As I said, the Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review, published by DCMS, the government department with responsibility for these areas, included a series of welcome commitments, many of which mirrored our recommendations. In keeping with the Commission's vision, the review offered a national plan to extend full fibre to 15 million homes and businesses by 2025, 25 million by 2030, and full coverage across the country by 2033. It made clear that competition should be the driver in enabling the delivery of full fibre to the majority of homes, while committing that government would at least part subsidise rollout to rural and remote areas. And ministers pledged in the review to take steps to cut the costs of deployment. But today, regrettably, the government is no closer to delivering the broadband plan the country needs than it was when the review was published last year. Since its publication, the review has remained just that, a review. Now we have a new Prime Minister and a new Cabinet. Full fibre had been front and centre of Boris Johnson's policy offer, with his ambitious promise made during the leadership campaign that it will be sprouting in every household by 2025. Many in the telecom sector question if this target is attainable. Indeed, some question whether it is desirable given the impacts that an overly fast rollout programme might have on costs and in other areas. But whether the rollout happens over 6 years or by 2033 or by a date in the middle, without putting a credible plan into action soon, we won't be going anywhere quickly. The government has committed to publishing a national infrastructure strategy in the autumn, and this is what it says will provide its formal response to our recommendations, including those on full fibre, and set out how it proposes to deliver them. We expected this to be connected to the budget, but the budget has now been postponed. Nonetheless, the need for early clarity and an ambitious strategy to enable and support the rollout has not lessened. Delivering full fibre for every home and every business across the country is going to be one of the most significant and one of the most important infrastructure challenges of our generation. The British economy depends on it, just as our quality of life increasingly depends on this connectivity. From our most densely populated urban neighbourhoods to remote rural communities, we should not underestimate the hard work needed to bring ultra-fast connectivity to tens of millions of people. At present, the government's position is unclear, and while this continues, industry will be forced to exercise caution as it thinks about the investment decisions that would be needed. The longer we kick the can down the road, the harder this is going to be to deliver, and as we wait for a strategy, advancing technology won't hang around, and people's growing expectations for better connectivity won't wait either. So we in the National Infrastructure Commission will continue to press for the early publication of an ambitious national infrastructure strategy, for commitment to achieving the delivery of a full fibre network, and for a clear plan for how the government will do so. I would encourage you to continue to press as well. Thank you very much.